Hey everyone, what's going on? It's If You Have to Pick Three. It's Matt.
And it's Zach.
But if you haven't joined us for one of these before, we pick a topic and then Zach gets a top three list, I get a top three list, and then we fight out for a final top three. You click the picture on this one. This one, a little interesting because there's not too many bands that do this or manage to do it well.
Yeah.
This is, if you had to pick three bands that released two good albums in the same year.
That's a good way to say it. Two good albums, maybe even great albums, dare I say. Because, we often complain about, bands that take forever to release a new album. Cough tool. And then we also sometimes complain about bands who just seem to, release too much music within a single year. Red Hot Chili Peppers, cough. Red Hot Chili Peppers, cough. But then it's very rare when you actually have a great band that actually releases two really important albums in their catalog within the same year, a single year. In the history of music, it was more common in the 60s and 70s. It's just still something that's like, wow, that's actually really cool. So we thought, let's take a look at our, which bands released some really great, at least two great albums within the same year, and determine who actually should be in the top final three lists. So Matt, without further ado, would you like to go first?
Sure, I'll go first on this one.
Before we also get into it, I apologize. Maybe we should also add a little clarification and note here. And feel free to disagree here, Matt, but there should be at least one rule where it's the albums had to come out within the same actual year. So, for example, it's two albums that came out and just make up a random year, like 1975. It can't be like, all right, this album came out in September of 1974, and then the second album came out in January 1975. It has to be within the same year. You cool with that?
Yeah, I'm good.
And I mean, not that I'm not revealing anything by this, but I'm also not opposed to it being two albums released on the same day either.
That's
I don't
within
actually
the same year.
It's within the same year. I actually don't have one of those said albums on it, but as long as it's not a double album, we should really clarify too.
Correct. So it's not like the Red Hot Chili Peppers Stadium Arcadium or Smashing Pumpkins Melancholy and Infinite Sadness.
Exactly. In theory, it could be Red Hot Chili Peppers Unlimited Love and the Dream Canteen yada yada yada, two double albums, but I don't think either of us will have picked that. And you can listen to a past episode of Am I Missing Something to understand why we would not pick Chili Peppers double album extravaganza of 2022.
Well, let me go back. No, I'm kidding.
So, Matt, go ahead. Share your top three picks.
Okay. So, number one, I think, is if you were to look at this back when the albums came out, I don't think it would have been that great, but the legacy and the history that's been built up over time from this band, I would completely argue that this is probably one of, if not the best example of this, and it would be Led Zeppelin's self-titled and Led Zeppelin's Led Zeppelin 2. Both of these albums were groundbreaking in many different ways and launched, which is completely mind-blowing in this instance, that this band released some of their best material within the same year, and it was to kick off their career, which is kind of, like I said, it's mind-blowing to me that you have songs like Good Times, Bad Times, Dazed and Confused, Communication Breakdown. How many more times on Zeppelin 1 and on Zeppelin 2? I mean, there's so many. A Whole Lot of Love, What Is and What Should Never Be, Thank You, Heartbreaker, Live and Love, and Ramble On. Just so many of the classic Zeppelin tracks that you associate them with were within 12 months of each other at the start of their career. So that's number one for me. Number two, I think I'm going to probably go with what Zach was alluding to earlier. I know that one of these albums I like better than the other. I'm definitely more partial to, let's first say that it is Guns N' Roses, first and foremost. And we are talking about,
you might pick that one, but continue.
And we're talking about Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, both released on the same exact day, and which is kind of weird because I was thinking about this at the start Do you consider this to be a double album? Because they did technically combine it into a double album, and they made that special edition cover where it was like the sliding panes to show both Use Your Illusions. But the more I looked into it, everybody considers it to be two separate albums, so I'm gonna go with that. And yeah, I mean, one of my favorite Guns N' Roses tracks of all time, November Rain, Use Your Illusion 1, Don't Cry, Live and Let Die, the Beatles cover. It's actually a really well done cover, and kind of, I think for me, very unexpected that they covered the Beatles. So, yeah, that's Use Your Illusion 1. And then number 2, of course, Civil War, Knocking on Heaven's Door, Shotgun Blues. There's so many just really good songs. Estranged, a 9-minute song that I didn't think that they really needed to record, but hell, they did a great job. And if you're a Guns N' Roses fan, you know these songs. So I'm kind of just preaching to the choir here. So that is number 2. You look like you want to say something.
No, I'll save it for later on.
All right. And finally, I think I'm going to have to go with another band that they kicked off their career in a very, very big way. And for what they were trying to accomplish at the time, I think it worked out really well for them. Because there was nothing else that was out there like this. And they managed to somehow take what sounded like a horror film and turn it into music. I'm talking about Black Sabbath. They released the original self-titled Black Sabbath album back in February of 1970, and then in February of 1970 they released Paranoid. So if you are unfamiliar with the original Black Sabbath album, the first track is like the mission statement for the band, and I feel like I've said this on another one of the podcasts that we did, but I can't remember which one because we've done so many at this point.
But you can listen to them all on any streaming platform you can imagine.
There you go. But yeah, Black Sabbath really is like a horror movie in a song. And actually, one of my all-time favorites, The Wizard, a really underrated Black Sabbath song, is also on that original self-titled album. And then, of course, you go into Paranoid, right? Like, Paranoid is probably, I want to say, the more accessible of the two albums because it's got War Pigs, Paranoid. One of my other favorite ones, too, that surprisingly was done really well by Pantera in Planet Caravan. And then, of course, Iron Man on here as well. So if you're looking for some of like the most classic of examples of bands releasing two albums within the same year and it being really well done, I don't think it gets really any better than Led Zeppelin doing Led Zeppelin the 1 and Led Zeppelin 2. Black Sabbath doing both their self-titled and Paranoid, and then Guns N' Roses on the same day in 1991 releasing both Use Your Illusion 1 and Use Your Illusion 2. So there you go. That's my 3. No particular order. Zach, what do you got?
All right. I'm going to start off with classic. This is kind of one of those hard to pick because this is, of course, a band, the greatest, you can argue, as we've discussed in many past episodes, arguably the most influential band in music and pop culture, period. Of course, I'm talking about the Beatles. And this is actually where it really tough in that you could either say, all right, in 1965, them releasing Help, and then shortly later, Rebel Soul was the best kind of example of a great band releasing 2 great albums within a year. Or you can even go fast forward to 1967 when they did Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and then a few months later, the Magical Mystery Tour. And, you know, if you ask, it's very possible if you ask me in a day or so, I might change my answer here, but I'm kind of leaning towards picking Help and Rubber Soul. And let me explain why. Help, well, first off, the title track is still one of my favorite Beatles songs. It's just a great pop rock song, period. But what makes the Beatles so amazing is that within such a short time period, they really evolved themselves as musicians, artists, and just people in general. basically went from, in the very beginning, a boy band to essentially Radiohead by the end of their careers, and just the way that they were so experimental and bizarre. And if you kind of look at the songs on Help and Rubber Soul, Help was almost like the last hurrah of the, I mean, still some great songs, but a little bit more in like, still kind of doing movies as well and getting chased around by girls. And then Rubber Soul was the first album that really saw them take a more mature approach to this, to the lyrics and to the songwriting itself, and led them to incredible pieces of work like Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's and the White Album and Abbey Road. Like, you look at like it almost like amazing how within the span of a year, and really a short few months, August is when the soundtrack to Help came out, and December when Rubber Soul came out, you almost saw, you can look in 1965 as this is when they made the shift from, we're just pop stars to, no, we are artists. So I kind of am leaning towards my first pick with the Beatles and Help and Rubber Soul. Second pick, I'm going in a more modern direction, and I'm going in a more metal direction. Now, it's well known how much I love System of a Down.
I knew it.
Yeah, I knew you knew it. I knew you knew it. And if you listen to our episodes, you knew it too. And, of course, when people say System of a Down, usually people first think of Toxicity, which is an amazing album and a groundbreaking album in metal too. But I have always felt that Mesmerize in particular, released in 2005, does not get enough credit. It's still one of my personal favorite albums, period. The way that they just expanded their sound on songs like BYOB and Radio Video and Violent Pornography, and Sad Statue is still just an amazing metal song. Like, it's just all types of sounds in this album. From start to finish, I think it's one of those perfect albums in metal. I still love it. And it was also huge, a massive, successfully popular album that debuted at number 1. And yeah, you could argue that Hypnotize wasn't as great as Mesmerize. But then you listen to songs like the title track, like Vicinity of Obscenity, Dreaming, and, Stealing Society. And you're like, oh, crap, this is actually a very good album too. Mesmerize was them sounding tighter than ever. And Hypnotize was definitely them kind of sounding a little bit more separated, and you could definitely hear the cracks a little bit more, but it's still a great freaking album. And also a massively successful album. Both debuted at number 1 and made them one of the, few bands to do that within the same year, have 2 albums debut at number 1 on the Billboard charts. And I actually always thought that, because at the time, massively successful. But pretty much shortly after the band disbanded, people kind of forgot about System of a Down and only really remember Toxicity. And I always felt that when Rolling Stone, and really most publications for that matter, did their like top 100 albums of the past decade, and they only listed Toxicity, I almost felt like System of a Down, as they were like in their own camps going, why does no one remember Mesmerize? Why does no one remember Hypnotize? They were huge albums. Why is, what, we need to reunite and remind everyone of our catalog. And that's what actually inspired them to reunite, as opposed to just like wanting to get back together. As almost a proof point, be like, no, we had more than just one album. Damn it. So I think Mesmerize and Hypnotize, as successful as they were, really don't get enough credit today. And I would argue that that is one of the best bands to release 2 great albums within a single year. So that's my second pick. System of a Down, Mesmerize, and Hypnotize. And my third and final pick, I'm going to kind of go in a different approach here. And when I say different approach, I really mean a different genre, because we talked a lot about rock. But let's talk a little bit about hip hop here. And unfortunately, this star passed away in 2021. And that's really when, unfortunately, the years leading up to his death, he had kind of been, more remembered for some of his antics than his music. But when DMX first hit the scene, his grittiness and rawness and his just hardcore approach to rap was really a breath of fresh air in the late 90s. And it really helped him stand out. And his debut album, It's Dark and Hell is Hot, and then followed a few months later by Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood. It just almost immediately, right out of the gate, it just proved that DMX was unlike any other hip hop artist at the time. Rough Riders. I mean, just that song alone still is a banger, and it's just you still listen to it, you just still be like, oh man, DMX was just such a raw talent, and it's just of course he was massive in the late '90s, early 2000s for obvious reasons. And again, to have his kind of similar to Led Zeppelin in a weird way, for him to have his first two albums be so massively successful within the span of a single year, it's just remarkable. So I'm going with It's Dark and Hell is Hot and Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood by DMX as my third pick. To recap, Beatles, Help and Rebel Soul, System of a Down, Mesmerize and Hypnotize. And man, he really knows how to choose the long titles. DMX's It's Dark and Hell is Hot and Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood. So there you have it.
X gon' give it to you.
He is going to give it to you. R.I.P. So let's go ahead and just say Led Zeppelin's 1 and 2 for sure in the final 3.
Yes.
For freaking sure. Whole lot of love. Boom. Period. Like let's even make the argument that Led Zeppelin 2 might be the one of the best sophomore albums in rock history. Period.
Oh, hands down.
Period. Down. And man, sorry to make you feel old, but those two albums came out 50 years ago.
You're not making me feel old with that one.
Wait, no, I'm sorry, not 50 years ago. 55 years ago. Even older.
Still, you're not making me feel old with that one. I'm sure somebody listening will feel old, and they can yell at Zach in the comments.
Please do comment on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Anyway, clearly, Led Zeppelin 1 and 2. And I know you were saying that I wanted to say things during Guns N' Roses 1 and 2, or Usual Illusions 1 and 2. Not that I wanted to, it's more so I feel like I can go down the rabbit hole and just spending hours and hours talking about those two albums in particular and like playing the game of if you had to cut, certain tracks and combine it into a single album, which would you do? And I almost feel like, to your point, technically, yes, there were two different albums, but you could definitely make the argument that like if the label actually let them just do a single release and make it a double album, they probably would have done that.
But they didn't. So
but they didn't.
Counts.
No, it absolutely counts, but that's why it probably didn't make my list. But yeah, there's some amazing songs on that. So, all right, I definitely said Led Zeppelin 1 and 2 from your list. Is there one from my list that you would definitely be like, all right, that's definitely going in the top 3, in the final 3, I should say?
I would say the Beatles.
Do you agree with my choice of Help and Rubber Soul over Sgt. Pepper's and Magical Mystery Tour?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's
because I did such an amazing job explaining.
I think. Well, of course, Zach.
Well,
of
thank
course,
you.
it's because you did a great job of explaining. It has nothing to do with the difference in sound. Completely shifting from the pop rock that they were doing at the beginning of their career, and then essentially with Rubber Soul transitioning into more of a progressive sound for the Beatles, for a lack of an easier way to say it, but. That's one of the things that none of the other artists on this list did. I mean, Sabbath, they came out with a sound that didn't exist, but that's not going between two different sounds. That was their primary sound. Zeppelin was all like rock and blues, and DMX is straight hip hop. And the uniqueness that was System of a Down, they still had their own thing. And it was still very System of a Down, but the Beatles... was definitely a shift.
I will also say partially why I'm also kind of like, I don't know if I would fight for Guns N' Roses Usual Illusions 1 and 2. I mean, well, first off, System of a Down's Mesmerize is a phenomenal album, period. Like, I love that from start to finish. Wouldn't touch a song off that one. Hypnotize, definitely some stuff you can be like, all right, they probably could have cut that. They probably could have, just taken 3 of these songs and just put it tacked it onto the end of Mesmerize. So I could make the argument of like not even of. I also admit that I love System of a Down, so that was more of a personal choice. So I can, be persuaded to push that one to the side and out of the top 3, of the final 3.
Okay.
So it really comes down to. Ever thought you'd hear this? It really comes down to Black Sabbath's first 2 albums, or DMX's first 2 albums.
It's interesting that it comes down to these two, and I honestly believe that these the sounds of both DMX and Black Sabbath are not that dissimilar for their genres.
Absolutely,
they're both very dark.
There is a reason why DMX definitely was respected by a lot of musicians and artists outside of hip hop too. In fact, I think we've talked about this when we were discussing the oddest collaborations in music. When Metallica did a weird collaboration with Ja Rule for Biker Boy soundtrack.
That was a fun episode.
That was a fun episode, which you can listen to on any streaming platform found in the link in our bio. Anyway, so for those who watched Metallica's Some Kind of Monster, the documentary, or at least the DVD with the bonus scenes that were like scenes that were cut from the final movie, there is a scene where they're approached about doing a collaboration of a hip hop artist for the movie Biker Boys, a classic. If you haven't seen it, available, I'm sure, on some streaming platform out there.
No sarcasm at all.
No sarcasm at all. Wink, wink. Yes, totally sarcasm. And in it, Metallica was going, "Oh, any chance we could collaborate with DMX? Any chance we love DMX?" And they're like, "No, DMX not available, but Ja Rule is." And they're like, "Ja Rule," and he's like, "Yeah, I mean, if you like DMX, you'll like Ja Rule." And they cut to Ja Rule doing his part, and like, all right, I can kind of see where the guy pitching Metallica is coming from, but it's more so just a testament to like, that's who Metallica wanted. They wanted DMX. And if you think about it, yeah, I could see DMX rapping over a really heavy Metallica riff and it actually working. Maybe not in the context of the classic movie Biker Boys, but again, you can see why he's the type of artist that appealed to more than just the hip hop fans. That his music transcended just one genre in weird ways.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still not going to argue for DMX over Black Sabbath.
No, I'm not saying I necessarily will either, but I figure it's fun to throw that debate out there.
It is. I don't know. It's very weird how it kind of came down to these two.
I definitely would agree that while DMX's first two albums had much more instant commercial success, Black Sabbath's first two albums definitely had much larger influence and impact on music in general. And influence,
Agreed.
impact.
Yep.
So I would agree to letting Black Sabbath be the final slot.
And there we have it.
Which, man, this is just a classic rock top final three. Again, kind of confirms how, like, man, the music industry, so freaking different in the 60s and 70s. Like, they couldn't release music fast enough back then. Like, if you wanted proof that literally all bands and labels cared about was getting the band on the road to sell something new.
And when it hit, it hit.
Whereas now it's like you almost don't want to release too much music too soon. You want to let the music resonate a little bit, but the times have changed. So to recap, the final three bands who released two great albums within a single year: Led Zeppelin's Led Zeppelin 1 and Led Zeppelin 2, Beatles' Help and Rebel Soul, and Black Sabbath's Black Sabbath and Paranoid. You agreed to that final list?
I agree.
Well then, listeners, what do you think? Do you think Matt and I are bonkers? Are we forgetting a pair of incredible albums that we're just going to kick ourselves for not naming? Or do you think, yeah, you got a great list? Or do you think that we're not giving DMX enough credit, or that we should give Guns N' Roses and System of a Down more flowers? Let us know on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X/Twitter, Threads if you're still on there. God bless you if you are.
Don't forget, X going to give it to you.
And also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Epic Footnote. You can listen to a lot of other episodes like this, including a ton of episodes featuring Black Sabbath, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Guns N' Roses, System of a Down. Not so much DMX. Maybe we'll change that in the new year. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to Lucky 13 Beard Co.
If you've been looking for a new product for your beard to make it feel luxurious and smell epic, look no further than Lucky 13. Log on to their website, lucky13beardco.com, and check out all of their amazing beard balms, oils, and beard accessories. We've got a beard oil with them out. It's called the Lemmy. It's a tribute to Lemmy from Motorhead. It smells epic: bourbon, tobacco, cola, and leather, all the things that Lemmy from Motorhead was about. And they've got, like I said, in addition to that, a ton of other great scents. If you love the scent of a barbershop, he's got something for that. They've got one that smells tropical. There's so many scents, I can't go through them all. But whatever you pick, put it in your cart and make sure to use the code EFP10 at checkout. 10% off of your entire order. Lucky13, the number beardco.com. Use that code EFP10 at checkout.
And if you want to support us a little bit more, whether it's just so we can keep making episodes like this, or just so you can let your friends know, hey, I listened to some funny, cool podcasts about music from Matt and Zach, go buy a t-shirt, coffee mug, hoodie, hat with our cool logo on it via the link on any of our social media platforms bios. It's just a fun way to let your friends know, hey, you might like this, and this is a cool logo. You want to know more? Go listen to Matt and Zach talk about it some more. Listen to them ramble on about music. See what I did there with the Led Zeppelin connection?
Sing my song.
Well, no, you can't actually sing it. We don't have the rights to that. Matt, you do this every time. We're in debt. We don't sell enough
On
t-shirts.
my way.
No, we don't sell enough t-shirts to be able to afford this. Buy more t-shirts so we can afford Matt singing Ramble On.
Maybe I'll do a lounge cover album of Led Zeppelin.
I feel like that already exists, like by multiple people. Don't waste your money on that. Anyway, thanks. Bye.
See ya.